What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we're talking about vinyl. Should you be buying vinyl in 2018? We're going to dive into the details and talk about why. So the comeback of vinyl, something that you hear about. I'm sure that you've been in a store where you see this new section for, vinyl records. You go into Urban Outfitters, Barnes & Noble, you go into FYE, all these stores, or even standalone record stores that you can go to now. It's really kind of amazing to see the year-over-year growth of vinyl making a big comeback. So I wanted to talk about why vinyl has made such a huge comeback, and in a world where everything is so busy and we're so occupied by our phones and our devices and busy, and music has, in my opinion, I think, become more of a background process for people. So why has vinyl made such a huge comeback? All I can talk about are the things that gravitated me towards it, and so for some people it's going to be different. For some people it's just the nostalgia. It's just like the cool thing to do. Some people it's solely about audio quality. For me, it's a mixture of both, really, just because of the physical presentation of the record, but ultimately number one is going to be the sound quality. So a big part of what sets apart listening to a record to listening to, say, an MP3 or even a CD is resolution. And by resolution, I'm talking about something called sample rates and bit depth. So when you think about resolution, your first thought is probably thinking about photos, right? You're talking about digital photos that either you're taking with your phone or you're taking with a camera. Now, we've all kind of been led to believe that the more megapixels a camera sensor has, then the better it is, right? And, sometimes that's not the whole picture, right? It's great to have more resolution, but sometimes it's actually more about the size of the sensor rather than just the amount of megapixels that are on the same size sensor. So if you think about that relationship to sample rate and bit depth, that's how you can think about digital audio. So when the CD was introduced back in 1982, a lot of people who were enthusiastic about listening to music on vinyl were like, "Oh, this is just ridiculous. It sounds horrible and all this stuff." So CDs and MP3s are in a resolution or sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz, and that's at 16-bit depth. So if you take a look here on like a little wavelength chart here, so you can see the actual wavelength, and then you can see these little boxes. That's basically the sample rate. So obviously the higher the sample rate, the more detail is actually captured when you record that audio or you listen to it back. When audio is recorded, back before computers really kind of took over the music industry and in terms of the recording industry, audio was recorded in studios on tape, which there was no resolution. It was just you were recording it on tape, which is truly analog, the purest sort of representation of what was happening in that room between the artist, their instrument, and the microphone. And even when computers did kind of take over with the recording industry, most of that audio, if you go to any recording studio, the professional recording studio, you're recording at higher sample rates than 44.1. Now, obviously, if you're recording in your home, that's probably what you're recording at. But any recording studio, you're going to be hearing audio that was recorded in 96 kilohertz and 192 kilohertz. There's just like a lot of different, much higher resolution sample rates that audio is actually being recorded at, even though we're listening to it at 44.1. So what if there was a format that was able to give you that audio in a much closer representation to what was actually recorded? Vinyl records is that's the closest that you're going to get, because when you listen to vinyl, you're not getting a resolution. That's just that is the purest representation of what was actually recorded. So I remember the first time that I had listened to, a couple records that I had heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times over the years. When I remember the first time I had listened to them on vinyl, I was actually blown away because I could hear things that I hadn't heard before. And I'd heard more depth and detail and warmth than I had ever heard before. And that was what kind of sold me on it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So for me, it's mostly about the sound quality. And then, you know, with the physical presentation, I love album artwork. I love opening it up and taking the record out for the first time and looking at all of the detail that goes into designing the album art, you know, and it's just in a much larger format than like a little plastic CD thing, you know. It's just so much cooler. So now I want to talk about how you can get started with listening to vinyl. Now, where can you buy vinyl? The nice thing about the fact that it's made a huge comeback is that you can pretty much get it anywhere. At any, you know, music store, you can, you know, places like FYE, you can even go to Barnes & Noble. If you go to Urban Outfitters, all these sorts of places will have a little section for vinyl. And these sections, what I've noticed over the last couple of years is that these sections are growing and growing and growing, and it's taking up more space in these stores because it's made such a huge comeback. Now, if you don't have a place like that near you, you also have the ability to order online. There's a website that I love ordering from called soundstagedirect.com. I can link that down there, and a few other websites that I have ordered vinyl from too. So the vinyl records themselves are very, very easy to get. Now, in terms of a turntable, phono preamp and stuff like that, you can go to one of these music stores, or I think even like a Bed Bath & Beyond, and find these cheaper sort of turntables made by a company called like Crosley and, you know, stuff like that. I think that that's great that it's just so accessible. Now, personally, I think that it's important to have a turntable with a tone arm that has an adjustable tracking weight. So, you know, there are a couple of companies, like I personally have a turntable made by Music Hall. They have turntables starting out at around $299. And then there's another company called Project. I always say it wrong. Same thing. They have turntables that start at around $299. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is that these turntables don't have phono preamps built in. So you will need to kind of think about something like that. A lot of these companies, Music Hall and Project, they do make their own. They range from $50, and then there's all kinds of companies that make them that go up into the thousands of dollars. I'm not saying that that has to be you, but I'm just letting you know that you can get started for a very, very good price. The other thing is that if you have like a stereo receiver that you're going to be plugging your turntable into, there's probably a phono preamp built into that. So if you don't want to go with a separate one, it's probably one built into your stereo. And then that's pretty much it, you know, and that's a great way to get started. And I would encourage you to really sit down and sit in between those speakers, or however you want to. And really, I challenge you to not do anything else while you listen to music. If you haven't listened to music on vinyl before and you're interested in getting set up like this, you know, you can sit down and really, you'd be surprised at how much more detail and more depth you hear. And also just how refreshed you feel when you listened through a record and you didn't do anything else while you were doing that. You weren't texting, you weren't scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or doing anything else. You were just focused on what was happening in that music. And I think it'd be cool if more people started doing stuff like that. So should you buy vinyl in 2018? I think the short answer is yes. If you love music and it's a big part of your life, I think you should do yourself a favor and get yourself set up with a starter little, you know, vinyl record set up with a turntable and a little phono preamp, and get yourself a few records and sit down and really listen to those songs, and you'd be surprised at the difference if you've never done that before. So guys, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the like button. If you're watching and you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're going to continue to talk about vinyl. We're going to talk about guitar gear, recording gear, microphones, all kinds of fun stuff. And if you are not following me on Twitter, please do that. All the stuff is in the description, and I will see you next week.